Hey everyone. So hopefully you've picked up on kind of our key emphases that we've been looking at as we look at different case studies and comparative politics, and sort of two main things that we focused on. One being kind of the apparatus of government, the structure of it. When we look at these different elements of the government or other, as we said, stakeholders in the society, how they've influenced one another, been influenced by other areas. So we've looked at things like the youth or the supreme leader in the case of Iran, the president, the Majlis, how each of those have a place in the society, a role to fill, and what they do with it, right? So just kind of how things work, but then also how they've worked of late. When they've been in the news, what's been developing lately in terms of the roles of these different things. And so obviously, compared to politics, it does focus more on the domestic sphere in a country. But I do at least want you guys to get a sense for the sort of things that Iran is facing right now in its society. And there are some big issues going on, and they do um, really have an impact internationally. It gets a lot of attention for a few things in particular internationally. So I'm just going to be kind of doing a tour of a few little things in the news. This won't be especially visual, but hopefully will help you kind of connect the dots between some of these different issues, how they have impacted each other one after the next. Won't be able to get into deep detail on any of them, but I kind of researched through a number of different articles and kind of put things together, and hopefully you'll at least get a taste for these. I'm not trying to gloss over anything or kind of maybe hide, let's say, the US's role in or anything in some of this, but if anything piques your interest, definitely feel free to look into these. I'll try to at least give you some of the links for the articles where you can look for yourself if you'd like to read deeper. But my goal wasn't to overwhelm you with information, but rather to at least just give you an introduction to some of these different things. Um, Also, I will just note that when I had this slideshow in full screen, it wasn't allowing me, as I recorded the video, to go back and click on other tabs to share some things from articles. So I'm hoping if I just leave it like this, I'll be able to do that so we can look at some different things going on. Okay, no, that was a bit of a long introduction, but I do want to get into some details here. First big thing facing Iran, it has to do with its nuclear energy and the development of a nuclear program. So this is something, as it says, Iran has long entertained the possibility of the development of nuclear energy. Different Iranian leaders have supported or opposed it, like Ruhollah Khomeini. He didn't want to see nuclear technology developed. The supreme leader who followed him, Ali Khamenei, did support it. Uh, for different presidents who maybe have had some more involvement in terms of negotiations and things, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad advocated it, and then Hassan Rouhani actually opened up bilateral talks with the U.S. to end sanctions. Iran has long been under sanctions from the U.S. and from some other countries as well, and the goal being to create a path to a deal allowing for the development of nuclear energy. Um, but note there that, this isn't something where it's been like Republicans have been on one side firmly and Democrats another. Everyone has had some skepticism when it comes to Iran and its desires to develop nuclear energy, with the thought being, well, maybe this is just a pretext because they want to actually develop nuclear weapons. So, an example there, it says on August 10th, 2012, President Barack Obama signed into law the Iran Threat Reduction and Syria Human Rights Act, expanding sanctions against Iran. And notice that it says something about Syria there. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. On January 16th of 2016, the Director General of the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, issued a statement declaring Iran to be in compliance with all of its obligations under, that's just an agreement name, necessary to declare implementation date. So this is something where the IAEA is allowed to go into Iran, investigate its nuclear program, see if it's actually using its technologies and things exclusively for energy development, or if it's hiding anything about what might actually be weapons development. Here it's saying that it was in compliance. And as we'll see, different people are either in agreement about that or skeptical about those ideas. Even if the IAEA doesn't see anything, some people say, well, maybe Iran's just doing a good job of hiding what they're up to. Okay, so almost certainly the country that is least believing of Iran when it comes to this is Israel. And so on April 30th, 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu showed this presentation where he had a bunch of documents seized by Israeli intelligence. And he said that based on these documents, he claimed the documents showed Iran was actually pursuing a nuclear weapons program, which included these warheads and so on. Said that Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions envisioned a rudimentary program compared to other nuclear weapon states. So others, though, weren't really accepting of Netanyahu's claims. They said, and now this is suspicious, you're just being theatrical, these documents don't show what you're saying. And a response that came from the Iranian defense minister was that these Israeli allegations were, quote, baseless and unfounded, and that it was basically an unfounded propaganda, and that those things showed that not Netanyahu was, quote, the boy who can't stop crying wolf. Hopefully, y'all are familiar with the story of the boy who cried wolf, which is about someone who just always and always claims that there's a threat, even when there isn't. Okay, so the question is, what are Israel's reasons for being so suspicious of Iran? Well, one thing that's bandied about frequently is a supposed statement by Mahmoud Ahmadinejad that said that Israel should be wiped off the map. And now, undoubtedly, Iran has been somewhat antagonistic to Israel. And in fact, after a statement that was given by Ahmadinejad was translated into English, as we'll see down here, um, there were different Iranians who did actually start posting billboards, posters, that sort of thing, using this kind of language in English, saying, yes, so here you go. Um, that, yeah, things about that Iran or that Israel should be wiped off the map. But really, when you kind of look at this, what makes this a little more complicated is that, first of all, Ahmadinejad was actually quoting uh, Ayatollah Khomeini, kind of referencing a speech that Khomeini had given. And what Khomeini said is this occupation regime over Jerusalem must vanish from the arena of time. It's obviously still a pretty aggressive statement, right? That's saying we don't want Israel to continue to rule over Jerusalem, but a little bit different from being, quote, wiped off the map, which is a much more sort of militant statement. And so it's a famous quote, one that is kind of used to frame really all the surrounding countries in terms of their attitude toward Israel, not just Iran, but maybe hyped up to be a little bit more than it was. And so, but that said, Iran has demonstrated reason for suspicion on the part of Israel, but with some language that people frequently cite as something that is probably greater than it was. So Washington Post here gave itself even a Pinocchio rating for saying we should have checked this a little more vigilantly than we did. Okay, that said, Israel has been afraid of the prospect of Iran developing nuclear weapons, feeling like, hey, if they're going to use them against anyone, it's going to be against us. And so this kind of just shows an attitude on the part of Israel, which said, in this situation, Israel has three options. One, to conquer Iran. The second, to bring about a change in the regime in Iran. The third, to convince the current political echelon that the price they'll pay to continue the nuclear project is greater than what they can gain by stopping it. So what this has meant is that Israel has launched different sort of types of subterfuge, one being that it has had plots on the part of its agents to kill Iranian nuclear scientists. So obviously, this makes people less likely to want to be a nuclear scientist in Iran, and it does also set back the project to develop nuclear technology. So another that you will see involves the creation of a virus that it kind of messed up one of the plants, or maybe more actually, where these things were being developed. And it is a good question. Does Iran really need nuclear technology? You could argue different ways, but the big question is, what do they intend to do with it? And I think you could make a case on a couple sides there. Nuclear technology is certainly scary. Nuclear bombs, as we know, are very scary. And if you look here, the countries that currently have nuclear technology, Pakistan, you could see, would potentially be a threat to Israel, of course. The rest of them, not really, although Russia does have some ties to Iran. Um, and Pakistan is further from Israel than Iran. This maybe isn't the best map to look at. Apologize for that. But if you kind of split the difference between Pakistan and Israel, it's sort of in the middle here between the two. So obviously, it's a closer threat that if they had them and wanted to launch them all at once, Israel is a quite small country, it could be really devastating. So you can at least understand why Israel would be really nervous about this idea. Maybe they exaggerate some things in terms of what Iran has stated in making their case, but you can understand kind of where they're coming from in being afraid. Okay, so to backtrack a little bit, what Israel was responding to is that the U.S. and others had entered into an agreement with Iran that allowed it to develop some nuclear technology under close supervision or oversight, and that this would also allow Iran to no longer be under some of the sanctions that it had been under. And so, as it says here, on July 14th of 2015, those states and Iran signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is that agreement that I mentioned, the JCPOA. Although there was strong opposition in both the Iranian and the U.S. governments, legislation was passed in the U.S. Congress and the Iranian parliament approving the deal. On July 20th, 2015, the UN Security Council adopted UNSCR endorsing the plan. The JCPOA is designed to limit Iran's, quote, breakout time to a nuclear weapon from an estimated few months to 1 year or more. This is being accomplished by the implementation of several measures to limit Iran's ability to enrich uranium. So it's like, okay, if we have closer oversight, we can kind of guide the process and ensure what they're using these resources for. All right. That said, when President Trump took office, he did not like this nuclear deal, felt like it was a bad deal, and that Iran was just going to be getting up to no good. So on May 18th, 2018, Trump announced that the United States would cease implementing the deal, began to reimpose nuclear related sanctions on Iran. He declared the deal was, quote, defective at its core, and cited Iranian support for terrorism and pursuit of ballistic missiles, as well as the Israeli intelligence revelations on Iran's earlier nuclear pursuits, as justifying the U.S. withdrawal. He did not cite any specific Iranian violations of the deal. The leaders of France, the UK, and Germany issued a joint statement on behalf of their countries that reemphasized their support for the deal and its importance to the non-proliferation regime. Non-proliferation means the idea that countries don't want to see nuclear weapons start to be developed in more and more countries. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that he was deeply concerned by Trump's decision and released a statement in support of the continued implementation of the JCPOA. Russia's foreign ministry also reiterated its support for the JCPOA and stated that U.S. actions compromise international trust in the IAEA. So I've got one other topic that I want to get into here, which involves some of the recent interactions between the U.S. and Iran, but it's a little bit more than I'd be able to do in 1 minute, so I'm going to make a separate video about that. Hopefully this has helped make some sense of what has been going on in terms of the nuclear agreements and the idea of what Iran's been trying to achieve.